Welcome to the Sports Card Talk Show. Sports Card Talk Show with Kevin Anderson and Lauren Walker, the Skull Brothers.
Welcome into episode 24 of the Sports Card Talk Show. Today we got the Monday Mount Rushmore. Which team we got up today?
Today's team is the Broncos with GK 45x5.
Oh, we'll get our good friend Greg on the phone, huh?
Yeah, let's ring a ding ding. Hang on.
Sounds good, man. Let's get him on the phone. All right, we got Greg on the phone here.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us on this episode.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, thanks you for having me, man. I always look forward to these shows each week, and man, we're honored to be here. So thank you very much.
Oh man,
Well, we're honored to have you on.
Yeah. We're super excited to have you help us do the Broncos Mount Rushmore. Rep your team there.
Well, man, and it might be the highlight of the year, man, because we look pretty rugged this year, and I'm kind of stressed out because it's the kind of performance that you see that lets you know as a fan that, hey, man, your front office is a mess.
Yeah.
And those things are never easy to overcome, and they don't get overcome quickly.
It's crazy that your defense is struggling the way that it is. With
you would think that it would have been totally the opposite, but
yeah.
I think, like I was talking with my brother, who's a season ticket holder up there in Denver yesterday, and I said I think that is exactly one of the reasons or indicators of the organizational dysfunction that's going on, because you've got a defensive-minded expert in Fangio, and then you've got some great players on defense, but the numbers aren't reflective of that. And I think really when it comes down to it, we have to be honest and say, hey, you've got some nice bookends there for the pass rush, but how old is your secondary? What do you have in your safeties? Are they proven?
Right.
Your defensive line, have you really put the investment in the quality athletes that you need on the field? And maybe it's just reflective of that. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
You guys still got the Williams guy as a D tackle?
I don't know.
I know. Like Garrett Wolf, he's still one of those rushers, and
I want to say I want to say Sylvester Williams, but
yeah.
To be honest, man, I watched him that first Monday night game, and I just did not like what I saw, and I thought, man, there's a lot of other teams out there that I'd rather spend my time on. Well, that's one of the interesting things about being into collecting is you get exposed to so many different players.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
With the way that you can just see so many different players and teams, and there's so many more intriguing stories that, I'm a Bronco fan, always will be. But, man, when it comes down to it, if that's what you're going to put out on the field, man, I got better things to do with my time, unfortunately.
When the Vikings have stunk, my fantasy team has been my most favorite team that year.
Yeah, that's just it. And, I like to tell a lot of football fans and collectors, like, hey, it's 2019. It's okay if your fantasy team is your favorite team.
Yeah.
It's okay if your favorite player is not on your favorite team. Because I think it's a business, and if the organization isn't paying you the respect as a fan, then maybe you got to kind of hedge your bets and throttle your support of that organization back a little bit as well.
Right. Well, with that, should we jump into your honorable mentions?
Let's go ahead.
All right.
Let's get on.
We got the Bronco Orange coming on.
If I'd have known you guys would have done that, I would have showed up in a barrel. That's awesome. So, my first honorable mention, I'm going to go with Peyton Manning. And, although he had most of his career with the Colts, and it was an illustrious career, he did do some things for the Denver Broncos that, will always be acknowledged and remembered. He had 4 seasons, 2 of which he had Super Bowl appearances, winning one of those Super Bowls. He won 1 NFL MVP during that time, and a total of 4 playoff appearances in those 4 years. And, we've got a 2013 acetate card to represent his time there with the Broncos. So that's our first honorable mention.
Awesome.
Next after that, we're sticking on the offensive side of the ball, and we're going with Rod Smith.
Oh,
and
nice.
Rod Smith has a great story. He was an undrafted free agent, ended up playing for the Broncos for 14 seasons. In those 14 seasons, he had 8 1,000-yard seasons, and 2 of those seasons he was over 100 receptions. And he was the first undrafted free agent to 10,000 yards receiving in NFL history.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of people don't realize, he was the all-time Broncos leader in receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns, and yards for scrimmage when he retired. And he was an integral part of those 2 Super Bowl wins. And when you talk to a lot of longtime Bronco fans, he's one of the guys that they most admire for, his character, his mental toughness, and just what he brought to the field, even without the stats.
I'm glad you brought him up, because whenever we were discussing ours, I was pounding the table for Rod Smith. I'm like, what about Rod Smith? Is like Rodney Dangerfield. He doesn't get no respect.
Well, a lot of those undrafted free agent types, they fall into that category across all the teams, and it's easily overlooked. He's kind of an anomaly, especially in today's game as a wide receiver, because he was just a guy that showed up on Sundays and he went to work. He didn't talk a lot about it. He didn't, ask for the ball. He didn't do some of the things we see as routine with receivers nowadays.
That's pretty refreshing, though.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys are still out there.
Yeah, they are.
They're probably, there's more to come too.
Yeah.
Our third honorable mention, we're going to go with Champ Bailey, right? And he's just a recent inductee into the 2019 Hall of Fame class, so that was pretty awesome. He had 10 seasons there in Denver. He started out with Washington, but primarily people remember him as a Bronco.
Oh, for sure.
In those 8 seasons, he was a Pro Bowler 8 times. He made the 2000 All-Decade team for the NFL, as well as the 50th anniversary of the all-time Broncos. So that they have their own organizational award like that, and he was one of the top players in their 50 years of existence. He had the most Pro Bowl selections for a defensive back all time in NFL history. He had the 1 Super Bowl appearance, which didn't turn out favorably, for him or the Broncos, but at least he made it to that pinnacle, because for a long time he was one of those players that, almost kind of like Peyton Manning was, hey, you're a great player, but you haven't won the big one.
Right.
And he was kind of a triple threat type guy, especially when he first came in the league. But I think when you look at his body of work over time, I mean, he's definitely deserving of an honorable mention.
Oh, for sure.
Then our last guy, still on the defensive side of the ball, we're going with Steve Atwater, right? And, a lot of people remember Steve Atwater for that big hit on Christian Okoye on Monday Night Football, and I mean, that's just a small part of not only the player he was, but the guy he was there in Denver as well. So over 10 seasons, he was part of 2 Super Bowl wins, 8 Pro Bowl appearances. He was also a member of the 1990s All-Decade team. And, he was arguably the MVP of Super Bowl 32, the first time that Denver actually, reached that pinnacle of performance, because up until that point, they were kind of like the Bills,
Oh, yeah. Or the Vikings.
4 Super Bowl defeats,
Yep.
His Super Bowl 32 stat line looks something like this, and this is as a safety, right? He has 6 solo tackles, 1 sack, 2 passes defended, and a forced fumble, and that forced fumble was integral in turning the Packers into a 4th and 6 situation in which he deflected the next pass. So,
oh, wow.
That if it wouldn't have been for Terrell Davis and those guys actually winning the championship that year, or the TD's contribution throughout that year, I think Atwater would have been one of the few defensive Super Bowl MVPs.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the guys that came to mind for me too, is Steve Atwater. He was just a great safety in the 90s.
Yeah, and he was one of those first big safeties. The guy was 6'3", and a lot of people didn't really realize that. And he had the speed and the range to cover and play at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
You see a lot of players nowadays that kind of they kind of fit that mold still. And I think what he brought to the game was pretty innovative for the entire NFL.
Awesome.
Well, do you want to get into the actual heads on the mountain?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, man. Let's
Those honorable mentions were impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, man. I mean, they had a lot of great guys. Like we looked at the history, going back to the 1960, and there's Floyd Little and Haven Moses and Rick Upchurch and Greg Cragen, Carl Mecklenburg, Gradishar, Lyle Alzado. I mean, so many great players, but at the same time, they were one of those teams that they didn't have a lot of playoff wins or runs until the late 70s, and they built momentum later on. So
right.
It's really tough to whittle them down to 4 honorable mentions and 4 heads of stone. So we'll get out the chisel and the hammer, and we'll start knocking down some granite right now.
Sounds good.
With Tom Jackson. That's going to be our first base on the mountain. And Tom Jackson, he was a 14-year veteran, all there in Denver, 3 times to the Pro Bowl, and he was a 3-time All-Pro as well. He had 2 Super Bowl appearances. Wasn't victorious in either one of them, but he got there. He also made the Broncos 50th anniversary team. And you look at his career, and it might not have been that momentous as a linebacker, but afterwards his contribution to the game didn't stop. He continued his work for the game. He was an ESPN broadcaster for 29 years.
Yeah.
And in 2015, he won the Pete Rozelle Excellence in Broadcasting Award, and that's actually sponsored by the NFL Hall of Fame. So even if he doesn't make the Hall of Fame as a player, he's still got a place there in Canton as that recipient of that award.
Yeah.
One of the cool things that I found out that I didn't know about Tom Jackson was he was voted by his teammates as the Broncos' most inspirational player 6 times.
Oh, wow.
So 6 times out of 14 years, that's awesome.
Yeah.
The card that I went with is a 1979 Topps base card version. Back in that day, it's only base cards anyway.
Right.
But that was.
And it was only Topps.
It was only Topps. Only base cards. There's like 400 and some of them, but that card right there was probably one of my ride and die cards, even now. So from the damn near 40 years. That's been one of my favorite cards. And, when I looked at that picture on that card when I was a little kid, even playing Nerf football out in the yard, tackle the man or whatever, that's what I wanted to look like or be like as a football player, So, I'd like to put his contributions to the Broncos organization and the game of football as a whole as the reason for him being on my Mount Rushmore. But, man, I'm a little bit biased.
Yeah.
I love Tom Jackson.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Now, the second head that we're going to go with is going to be Von Miller. And although he's still playing, it's hard not to acknowledge and recognize the contributions he's made to the organization. Maybe some of the contributions he's made to the NFL as well. I mean, he has a style of play, and his abilities are kind of unparalleled except for a select few linebackers all time, and we're lucky to have him. And
yeah.
I enjoy watching him. So far to this point, he's played 9 seasons. He's had 2 Super Bowl appearances, one loss to the Seahawks and 1 victory against the Panthers, in which he was one of those NFL defensive Super Bowl MVPs. So,
yeah.
I mean,
for sure.
You've got to be a baller to pull down that trophy in all time. So in those 9 seasons, he's made the Pro Bowl 7 times.
That was me and Kevin's first Super Bowl. We watched that Super Bowl together.
Yeah.
And while we were watching it, we were like, Von Miller's got to be the MVP of this game.
That sack on that strip sack on Cam Newton that recovered for 7.
Yeah.
Like I lived through all of the Broncos Super Bowl losses, and there were moments in each one of those games, even when I was a little kid, that there was one play, and that play defined how that game was going to go. And unfortunately for the Broncos fans, most of the time it's been a loss.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And when that play happened, I just knew in my heart of hearts as a football fan like even if I wasn't a Broncos fan, I was like, that team is going to win.
Yeah.
They're not going to be denied. So he also won an NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year trophy. He's the all-time Bronco sack leader. He was the third fastest to 50 sacks, and 1 and 2 was Reggie White and Derek Thomas.
Yeah.
You know, and
Pretty good company.
Really good company. You know, I mean,
right.
even if he stopped today, you know,
yeah.
an argument could be made, you know, to start carving that bust out for him.
Oh, for sure. He's already in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and it was interesting. I was watching one of the NFL Network's roundtable discussions last night, and they had the linebacker conversation. And, you know, you had Mike Singletary, Ray Lewis, Willie Lanier, Harry Carson, and Lawrence Taylor. And when they asked who's next or who's the next guy to that these guys like in the game, Mike Singletary chose Von Miller. It was kind of interesting. So, yeah, I don't disagree with you guys. I mean, I think even if I wasn't a Bronco fan, I loved that guy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then our third guy, you know, we're going to go on the other side of the ball, and I'm picking Shannon Sharp. And, you know, he had 12 seasons in Denver, two-time Super Bowl champion, 8-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All-Pro, and also a member of the 1990s All-Decade team, along with being a member of the 50th anniversary Broncos all-time team. He was a 2011 Hall of Fame inductee. And, you know, we see, you know, he made an indelible impression on the game of football, not only with just the Denver Broncos, but also the Baltimore Ravens. He also won a title with those guys.
Yeah.
And listening to some of the Hall of Famers from the Ravens team, you know, you can tell the influence and leadership that he brought to the locker room. And we sure missed him in Denver. You know, like it was like night and day from when he was there and when he left. And another interesting thing about Shannon Sharp, and one of the reasons why we want to put him on that Mount Rushmore, is he had a great career, but he's also still involved with the game, you know, as a broadcaster and an analyst. You know, if I could say that 10 times fast. You know?
Right.
But, you know, and he's really, if you watch his body of work, because he's been doing it for about 15 years. But if you remember back when Shannon Sharp first started there on CBS Network, he wasn't a very good analyst. You know, it was a hard guy to listen to. But now you see him on Undisputed there on Fox Sports Network, and you can tell that the guy's really worked hard to improve and hone his craft. So, you know, I just got a lot of personal admiration for Shannon Sharp, and there's no way I could build a mountain without his face on it.
Right,
you know?
right.
So then that leaves us one more, you know, and you know you might need a drum roll or whatever, but you know I think we'll find room because there's a couple glaring omissions to this point. The last guy we're going to put up there on that mountain is Terrell Davis, and Terrell Davis is probably our favorite Bronco of all time. You know, is one of the guys that, man, you know, I've got like I see Lauren's stack of Teddy Bridgewater's. I've got like a similar stack of Terrell Davis's, and you know, man, I don't think I could part with any of them. You know, so when I seen that big stack of cardboard the other day, man, I was like, man, I can relate to that. So, with Terrell Davis, you know, he only had a seven-year career, and it was cut short by injury. But in those 7 short years, man, he's a member of 2 Super Bowl winning teams. He won the Super Bowl MVP award in Super Bowl 32. He was the Broncos' all-time leading rusher, 3-time Pro Bowler, 3-time All-Pro, NFL MVP in 1998, 2-time NFL Offensive Player of the Year in 1996 and 1998, AFC Player of the Year in 1996, NFL rushing leader with 2,008 yards in 1998, also a member of the 1990s All-Decade team. And, you know, when we talked about Atwater earlier in his stat line in Super Bowl 32, and you might think, man, that was an amazing game by a defensive player. Well, it was. But it was overshadowed by a guy going for 157 total yards, 3 touchdowns, and he did that in 3 quarters because of the migraine issues that prevented him from playing the second quarter. So, he was a Hall of Fame inductee in 2017. Some may say, you know, it was long-awaited or well-deserved, or he got stiff for years. The point is, he got there. And,
Right.
you know, the career kind of paralleled. I remember you guys talking about Gale Saryers. You know, those guys' careers kind of paralleled each other, and as far as longevity, effectiveness, and impact on the game. And another reason why we're going to put him up there on that mountain is, you know, he's also a broadcast analyst. You know, he's got 10 years there with the NFL Network, and, you know, with Tom Jackson, Shannon Sharp, and Terrell Davis, you know, those guys are Broncos. They're clearly identifiable as a Bronco, but beyond their playing days, they've gone to be gone to contribute to the game in other ways. So that wasn't a fat joke. So yeah, as far as, you know, we've got our 4 honorable mentions. We've got our 4 faces on Mount Rushmore, the blocks of granite, and we left out one guy. And, you know, watching some of these Mount Rushmore episodes that you guys have done, the face of the franchise is. It's a great thing because it allows you to fit one more guy on the mountain and still acknowledge, you know, that one guy that just defines the organization. And then, of course, that's John Elway. And, you know, he had 16 years as a player. And in those 16 years, you know, he had 5 Super Bowl appearances. You know, of course, he lost 3, but he won 2, and he went out on as a winner in his last game, Super Bowl 33, which at that time a lot of people hadn't done. You know, and you see that more. It's more common now than it was then at that time. He was Super Bowl MVP of that Super Bowl 33, 9-time Pro Bowler, 1-time All-Pro. And that was kind of interesting to me. Like, hey, you know, his peers didn't vote him as an All-Pro more than one time, but you think about that quarterback class of 1983, and, you know, there wasn't a lot of room to be an All-Pro then.
Right.
He was the NFL MVP in 1987, 2-time Offensive Player of the Year. He was also an NFL Man of the Year in 1992, another member of the 1990s All-Decade Team. And, you know, one of the things that kind of at the first of the year, or at the first of his career, you know, he was that number 1 draft choice, and he was drafted by the Baltimore Colts, but he refused to play with them. And at that time, people didn't do that, you know. And this is before free agency, before, you know, being able to set your own terms as a player. So he was really kind of an innovator in that way. Now, he didn't suffer some of the negative media coverage that some of the other people that have followed that course have had to endure since then. But, you know, he was still one of those first guys to kind of give it to the NFL and say, hey man, I'm not playing by your rules. I'm going to set my own rules.
Right.
And, you know, it really kind of defined how he played the game. You know, he did what he needed to do when he thought it needed to be done. And, you know, I mean, his body of work speaks for itself as a player. You know, he was a NFL Hall of Fame inductee back in 2004. So, you know, that the NFL recognizes his greatness. But when he retired, he held over 30 franchise records for player stats. So he was their all-time leader in 30 different categories.
Wow.
Now, not only as a player, he's also been a general manager and vice president of operations for the Denver Broncos. You know, so he's got 8 years of doing that, and then those 8 years, he's been to the Super Bowl twice and 1 Super Bowl win. And, you know, I think he's doing a good job. And you know, it's kind of one of those things that he's such an icon to the organization that people are either going to rough him up unfairly or have kind of a blind eye to what's going on. But, you know, I think he's doing the best he can with who he's got to work with. If you ask me as a fan, who else would you want running your organization? I would probably go with John Elway. I do realize that the Bolin Trust issue, you know, the family group that controls the interests of the team is kind of in disarray with the you know, the struggles that Pat Bolin had with Alzheimer's, and then his passing. You know, it's kind of made things kind of crazy, and it's going to take a few years to get through that. I think eventually we'll get back to where we are. You know, I mean, if you look at the list of honorable mentions and the Mount Rushmore and the face of organizations, it was clearly a dominant organization throughout the 90s and early 2000s. And Mr. Bolin had a lot to do with that too.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
That's what we've got. That's our honorable mentions. That's our Mount Rushmore and our face of the franchise. So
That's awesome. I kind of we've called an audible a couple times, and I think I want to call another audible. We only really had one different one, and I think I'm going to call an audible. And I can't argue with you really. I mean,
I'm good with it.
Are you good with that? I mean, we had instead of Tom Jackson, we had Randy Gradisher. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And a lot of that was attributed to a lot of stuff that I was reading is that he was kind of like the leader of the Orange Crush defense, and
Right.
7 Pro Bowls and 10 dominant seasons, and I just kind of was giving him the nod. But then hearing you talk about Tom Jackson, I'm like, yeah, I don't have an argument with that. And we had Elway in our Mount Rushmore, so
did you?
it kind of goes into, well, he can do dual duties,
Yeah, we didn't have a face of the franchise, but if there was a face of the franchise, it would definitely be John Elway.
So he's serving dual duties for us on that.
Well, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Well, I think the Vikings are benefiting from the Broncos right now because we've got Gary Kubiak as a offensive. He's an offensive. He's not the offensive coach, but he's like a consultant, offensive consultant.
Right.
And actually, our offensive coordinator requested that we get him, and that zone blocking scheme that the Vikings are running this year are making all of our running backs look like.
Oh man, Dalvin Cook, it looks like a monster.
Yeah.
And I was curious how that would play out in Minnesota when I heard that Kubiak was going up there to consult, because he's a great offensive mind. I wasn't that big of a fan of him as a head coach.
You're right.
Because he's kind of one of the personalities that's kind of back off the sidelines, and you don't really see a lot of demonstrative actions from him and stuff. But I mean, he was effective, and he's a great offensive mind, And the thing about Kubiak, I mean, I could make an honorable mention for him, or maybe even put him on the Mount Rushmore, because I think, without having the stats in front of me, I think he was in Denver as a backup quarterback to Elway for 9 of Elway's 16 seasons.
He was actually I think he was offensive coordinator for those 2 Super Bowl wins, and then
he was, yeah.
And then he was offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens when they won one, and then he was the head coach of the Broncos, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So,
he
I'm
was.
kind of seeing a pattern there. I'm hoping that pattern continues.
Man, me too. Because what's unfortunate about it is, with the NFL Network showing the 100 greatest plays and the 100 greatest players and all of this commemoration for the 100th year anniversary, I'm seeing a lot of like Vikings adversity, and not to kick you guys in the nuts or anything like that, but man,
we already know it, Greg.
but man, you guys have had a great franchise, and that's one of the things that, as I get older and watch more football, I kind of want everybody to win. I want everybody to be able to, raise that Lombardi trophy. And there's just some organizations that, like, man, I remember Bud Grant. I remember, the Purple People Eaters. I remember watching games going on at, what was that, Memorial Stadium?
Yeah.
When the outside and it's like September and you can see smoke coming out of
Right.
people's mouth. And I mean, I think about Chris Carter and Randy Moss, and it's definitely one of the organizations I enjoy watching. I'm loving seeing what Zimmerman's doing with the team. I like some of the players, and I want to see them be successful.
Right.
Once we got Zimmer, that's whenever I started drinking the purple Kool-Aid hard again. You know how it is. Sometimes you don't drink the Kool-Aid as hard, but yeah,
Right.
I actually blame Mike Zimmer for me starting to collect cards again.
Well, at least you got a good guy to pin it on.
Yeah, well, I feel like he kind of finally gave the Vikings a sense of direction. He's got a vision for what he wants his team to be. And I felt like we were visionless there for several years. And you just kind of go, okay, I'm rooting for my fantasy football team this year.
Yeah, I mean that really goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You know, if you don't see that, it's tough to really be all 100% bought in. And I'll tell you what, you know, another week of what we've seen so far this year, and I might just jump on that bandwagon and drink the purple Kool-Aid with you.
We'll send you out a Skull Brothers shirt.
Yeah, man, that would be awesome. I saw those and I'm like, man, that would be cool. If you guys start slinging T-shirts, man, we'll definitely be in line to catch one.
Yeah, all right.
Sounds good, man.
You'll definitely get one once we start doing that, man.
Cool. We're looking forward to it.
Well, I just want to thank you again for coming
Yeah,
on
thanks
and
so much,
repping
man.
your Broncos, and maybe we'll stick on the line here for a second after we end the episode here. But we're gonna try something a little bit different, because usually we would end the call and then we do a little recap. But I think we'll just try it new today, and we're just gonna say thanks for coming on and joining us, and Skull Brothers out.
Yeah, Skull Brothers out, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right,
Appreciate it.
hold on one second. All right, thanks for watching the episode today. We like to end every video with a little giveaway. How did we decide we're gonna do it? We're gonna post a video,
and then a week later, or comment right away, but a week later, we're gonna close the giveaway and ship out, do a randomizer if we get more than one comment,
right?
And if we just get one comment, then you
Guess
automatically
what? You got
win.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all you have to do is comment below whether you would want to do a black grab bag, blue grab bag, and of course our preference, purple.
Go purple.
Yeah. So again, thanks for watching. And after the video drops 1 week later, boom, go with that, huh?
Yeah.
Skull Brothers out.
Skull Brothers out.